There is a specific kind of exhaustion that only certain people understand. It is not the tiredness that comes
Hmm.
from working too hard or sleeping too little. It is the tiredness that arrives the moment someone mentions that a family gathering is coming up, a cousin's wedding, a holiday dinner, an uncle's birthday, and something in you immediately begins calculating the cost of attending, the performance required, the version of yourself you will have to become, and how long the recovery will take afterward. And if you are someone who quietly avoids their relatives, not with dramatic confrontation, not with a public announcement, but with a steady stream of polite excuses and gentle unavailability, then you probably also carry a particular kind of quiet guilt about it, because you know you are supposed to want this. You have been told your whole life that family is everything, that you will regret the time you did not spend with these people, that blood is thicker than water, that one day they will be gone and you will wish you had shown up more. And yet you do not show up. Or when you do, you count the hours until it is acceptable to leave. Or you leave early and spend the drive home oscillating between relief and guilt in a cycle that never quite resolves. So what is actually happening here? And is there something psychologically real behind it? Or is this simply
Hmm.
avoidance dressed up in sophisticated self-justification?
Hmm.
The honest answer is that it is both more complicated and more understandable than most people think. The first thing to understand is that not all family relationships are the same kind of relationship. We tend to speak about family as if it is a category defined by warmth, closeness, and mutual care. But biologically and sociologically, family is simply the group of people you did not choose who happen to be present during the most formative years of your life. And those years, the childhood years, the adolescent years, the years before you had full agency over your own life, are precisely the years during which the deepest psychological patterns are formed. What this means is that, for many people, extended family is not simply a group of people who are beloved and familiar. It is a group of people who were present during experiences that were confusing, painful, or psychologically complicated. And returning to that group, even decades later, even when circumstances have changed, can trigger something that psychologists call a return to baseline. A return to baseline is what happens when the environmental cues associated with an old relational pattern reactivate that pattern, even in a person who has done significant work to change. You can spend years in therapy understanding your childhood dynamics, developing a more secure sense of self, building healthier relationships in your adult life. And then you walk into your grandmother's house for Christmas, and within 45 minutes you are behaving like a 15-year-old again. The siblings trigger the old competition. The parent triggers the old anxiety. The aunt who always had something to say about your choices triggers the old shame spiral. The environment itself carries information that your nervous system reads and responds to before your conscious mind has a chance to intervene. This is not weakness. It is the entirely predictable behavior of a nervous system that learned its first and most enduring lessons in that very environment. There is also the question of identity. Who you are, who you have become in your adult life, may be quite different from who you were in that family system. And family gatherings have a particular way of collapsing that distance. The roles assigned to you in childhood, the responsible one, the difficult one, the quiet one, the overachiever, the black sheep, have a remarkable persistence. People who have known you since before you could form memories tend to see you through those early templates. And being seen through an outdated template can feel like a small but sustained act of erasure. When your adult identity is not recognized, when the person you have worked hard to become is either invisible to or irrelevant to the people around you, the social experience registers as something more than merely uncomfortable. It registers as a threat to the self, and the self's natural response to that threat is withdrawal. There is also something worth examining about the specific social dynamics of family gatherings that make them uniquely taxing compared to other social situations. With friends, with colleagues, with acquaintances, there is an implicit social contract of mutual respect and chosen association. Both parties have opted into the relationship, and both parties understand that their continued presence is conditional on that relationship, remaining reasonably functional and rewarding. This creates a natural incentive for both parties to behave with some degree of care and consideration toward each other. With family, particularly extended family, that contract does not exist in the same way. The relationship is assumed to be permanent and unconditional regardless of behavior, and this assumption of permanence changes the social dynamics in significant ways. People say things to family members that they would never say to a friend. People ask questions that would be considered intrusive if asked by anyone else. People make comments about your body, your choices, your career, your relationship status, your finances, your parenting, your lifestyle that they would not dare make to a person whose goodwill they were trying to maintain. And when you object to these intrusions, when you set a limit or push back, you are often met not with apology or correction, but with the accusation that you are being too sensitive, that this is just how the family is, that they mean well, that you need to stop taking everything so seriously. This dynamic, where the behavior that is causing harm is normalized and the person objecting to it is pathologized, is one of the most psychologically exhausting patterns that exists, and it is extremely common in family systems. Psychologists who study family systems refer to this as the identified patient dynamic. When a family system is operating with unhealthy relational patterns, it frequently develops a member, often the most sensitive or most honest member, who is labeled as the problem. This person's discomfort becomes the issue, rather than the patterns that are producing the discomfort. And this person often grows up into an adult who finds family gatherings deeply uncomfortable not because they are particularly fragile, but because they are the one in the room who has refused to pretend that everything is fine. There is also the psychological cost of code switching. Code switching is the process of shifting your language, behavior, values, and presentation to fit a different social environment. Most adults do some degree of this naturally as they move between professional and personal contexts, between different social groups, between different relationship registers. But for people who have done significant personal growth, people who have changed their values, their worldview, their relational style, their sense of what is acceptable, the gap between who they are now and who the family expects them to be can be enormous. And the sustained effort of performing a version of yourself that is significantly out of alignment with who you actually are is genuinely exhausting. It is not simply tiring in the way that any social engagement is tiring. It is tiring in the specific way that sustained inauthenticity is tiring. It costs something at a level that is difficult to articulate but easy to feel. And this is part of why the avoidance tends to increase over time rather than decrease. Because each time you attend and endure the experience, the nervous system files it as evidence. It stores the cost. It remembers the recovery time. And the next time an invitation arrives, the anticipatory exhaustion begins earlier, runs deeper, and generates a more powerful pull toward the exit. There is also something worth saying about the specific guilt that tends to accompany the avoidance of relatives, because this guilt is itself worth examining carefully. The guilt usually sounds like this: these people love me in their way. They are not malicious. They are doing their best. Life is short and one day they will be gone. I will regret this. And much of this may be true. Many people who find family gatherings difficult do not doubt that their relatives love them in some genuine sense. The difficulty is not usually that the love is absent. The difficulty is that the love is expressed in forms that feel harmful, intrusive, diminishing, or suffocating. And the cultural narrative around family does not have very good language for this particular experience. It does not easily accommodate the idea that you can genuinely love someone and simultaneously need significant distance from them in order to remain psychologically intact. There is a concept in psychology called the optimal distance. Different relationships, by their nature, function best at different levels of proximity and contact. Some relationships are nourishing at high frequency and close proximity. Others are genuinely positive, but only when encountered occasionally and at some degree of distance. Trying to force a relationship into a frequency or proximity that it cannot sustain without causing harm is itself a form of disrespect to what the relationship actually is. For many people who avoid their relatives, what they are doing intuitively, even if they cannot articulate it clearly, is finding the optimal distance. The distance at which the relationship can be something positive, something that does not cost more than it gives, something that both parties can actually sustain without accumulating damage. There is also a specific psychological phenomenon worth naming here. It is called enmeshment. Enmeshment describes family systems in which individual boundaries are not clearly defined or respected. In enmeshed families, individual members are expected to prioritize the group's emotional needs above their own. Privacy is not respected. Individual choices are treated as communal property to be commented on, judged, and managed. Emotional responsibility is diffuse, meaning one member's distress becomes everyone's problem and everyone's performance. People who grew up in enmeshed family systems often spend enormous energy in adulthood learning to establish and maintain boundaries. And the family gathering, the very setting where enmeshment is most concentrated and most active, can feel like a direct threat to the boundary work they have spent years doing. Avoiding the gathering is not avoidance of people they love. It is protection of the selfhood they have worked very hard to build. And yet the guilt persists. Because alongside all of this, there is also something genuinely real about the loss that comes with distance from family, particularly when age and mortality become more present. And it is worth sitting honestly with both truths simultaneously. The psychological task here is not to eliminate either the need for distance or the awareness of loss. It is to find a way of relating to family that honors both. That might look like attending some gatherings and not others, with a clear sense of your own limits rather than guilt-driven inconsistency. It might look like shorter visits with a known endpoint, which gives the nervous system something to hold onto. It might look like maintaining some contact while being honest with yourself about how much contact is actually sustainable without becoming corrosive. What it does not look like is the belief that you are broken for needing distance, or that your relatives are monsters for making it necessary, or that the only valid relationship with family is one of complete closeness and unconditional presence. You are allowed to love people at a distance. You are allowed to acknowledge that a relationship has a cost that currently exceeds its benefit. You are allowed to protect your own psychological health without it being a betrayal of the people who share your blood. The person who avoids their relatives is not always running away from love. Sometimes they are running toward the version of themselves that the family gathering makes it impossible to be. And that is a different thing entirely. If this resonated with you, please subscribe. There is something in the pinned comment for anyone who wants to explore these patterns more deeply. And thank you for watching.